If you were there when they signed the Constitution, pages 32 to 39. What was George Washington like? George Washington was the most famous delegate at the convention. After the Revolution, many people thought George Washington would make himself a king. People loved him and respected him. He was really our first national hero. He was a proud man and prickly. He had a quick temper and could burst into a rage and bellow like a bull. He was fearless. He was 55 at the time of the convention, but he had more energy than men half his age. He loved to ride his horses at top speed. He could dance for 3 hours at a time. He wore false teeth made of ivory, not wood, and they didn't fit very well. His false teeth made it hard for him to talk, so sometimes he didn't like to speak in public. But he loved to be with people, and he loved to listen. He would go to the tavern and share in the gossip. He had so much company that he once said that he and his wife hadn't dined alone for 20 years. Who was Alexander Hamilton, and what was he like? Alexander Hamilton was a delegate from New York State. He was born in the West Indies. He was probably one of the smartest young men at the convention. Some people at the convention said he was too smart for his own good. He would go to become our first Secretary of Treasury. Hamilton was small and good-looking. Men at that time wore tight pants called breeches that ended at the knee. They also wore stockings, sometimes of silk. Sometimes men with skinny calves put bags of sand under their stockings to look like muscles. Occasionally the sandbags would leak all over the floor and the ladies would giggle. But Hamilton never had need of sandbags in his stockings. People said he had a graceful turn of leg. Who was Gouverneur Morris? Gouverneur Morris was a delegate from Pennsylvania. He was another of the young men who had Gouverneur Morris was a wealthy young man. He lost a leg in an accident, but he still managed to dance on his wooden leg. Gouverneur Morris was always up for a joke. One night he boasted that he wasn't afraid of the proud George Washington. He made a bet to slap George Washington on the back. The next day he thought better of it. He didn't actually slap Washington on the back. He just put his hand on Washington's arm. The great man turned and looked at me, and I wished the earth had yawned and swallowed me up, wrote Morris afterwards. What was James Madison like? James Madison is often called the father of the Constitution. He was short, 5'6", no bigger than half a piece of soap, said the man who knew him. He had pale blue eyes and brown hair. He never had to work for a living. His father had built up an estate of thousands of acres with many slaves in Virginia. Most wealthy young men in the South were expected to ride, hunt, and drink, but Madison loved to read. He was shy. He thought of himself as sickly, but as the historians Christopher and James Collier said, at an age when few diseases could be cured, he was rarely sick. He went from one high-pressure job to another, member of Virginia government, congressman, secretary of state, president. He was a politician until his death at 85. Who were William Patterson, Roger Sherman, and Luther Martin? William Patterson was from New Jersey. He was a lawyer and a very hard worker. He would soon become a Supreme Court justice. Roger Sherman was from Connecticut. He was a farmer and a shoemaker. He was one of the few self-made men at the convention. He was round with a rather large head. He's the oddest-shaped character I ever remember to have met with, said a few delegates. Sherman was a clever debater. Luther Martin was from Maryland. He was one of the strangest men at the convention. His family was poor. He was a brilliant lawyer, but he sometimes drank too much. It is said he once bumped into a cow and said, "Excuse me," and sometimes he would just talk on and on. Chances are you haven't heard of these men. All three fought against Madison's plan and lost. History is written by the winners, say some historians. What were the two sides at the convention? Madison, Franklin, Washington, Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, and Robert Morris were all nationalists. They wanted to see a great united nation come out of the convention. Patterson, Sherman, Martin, and others worried that men like Alexander, Hamilton, and Gouverneur Morris did not care enough about liberty. They thought a huge united nation would take away some of the freedoms that they had won during the Revolution. Those people wanted to make sure that the states kept their rights. Some call these men the states' rights people. Both sides had studied history. They knew they had made history by fighting and winning a revolution. They studied England, and they admired the way England had a parliament. They studied ancient history. Each side wanted to create a republic, a government without a king, that would be strong yet free. They argued about how to do this. This is the end of today's lesson.